Welcome to Liberation Lens, where stories unfold beyond the headlines and perspective truly matters. History isn't finished, it's unfolding. This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters.
This is Liberation Lens, Perspective Matters. In today's documentary, we confront the invention of black and white as human identities, the political tools that have kept Africa divided and colonized for centuries. We reveal how these categories were never natural or neutral, but created to control our minds, our resources, and our future. For the African youth, this is your history. And this is your fight. Race as we know it today was not born in nature. It was born in the colonial imagination. Listen. The story begins with the colonial invention of race in the 15th century. In the 15th and 16th centuries, as European powers, Spain, Portugal, Britain, and France, set out to conquer the world, they needed a story. A story that justified taking land, labor, and life from people who looked different. So they crafted a myth, which is that skin color defined your humanity. It decided your place in the world. Dark skin became a mark of servitude, light skin, a badge of mastery. By the early 1600s, English and Portuguese colonial laws began to explicitly mark African people as less than human. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy to divide and control. What followed was the codification of race in the law. In the British colonies of North America, the first racial codes appeared in the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. They declared that any African, indigenous, or mulatto person was permanently enslaved, while Europeans were free. The same logic spread across the Caribbean plantations and South America. This wasn't biology. It was the law. A law that turned people into property and whiteness into power. The same logic then spread to the Caribbean sugar plantations, and later to South Africa. In these laws, black meant property. White meant power. And the language of race was used to keep wealth flowing out of Africa and into European hands. Fast forward to the mid-20th century. In South Africa, the Population Registration Act of 1950 forced every person to be classified by race: white, for those of European descent, the rulers; black, for the indigenous majority, the ruled; colored, and Indian, as buffer classes, divided to weaken unity. These classifications had one purpose: to ensure that the wealth and power of Africa flowed to the descendants of European settlers. But remember that these labels were not natural. They were tools of empire, to keep land in white hands and labor in African hands. Out of this racial hierarchy, a poison known as colorism seeped into the Americas and African communities as a weapon. The colonizers taught our parents and forebears to mistrust ourselves and chase a false proximity to whiteness. Lighter skin meant closer to whiteness, and closer to power. The European colonialists then elevated lighter-skinned people, often the children of forced relationships, to divide African communities further. Therefore, dark skin was made to feel unworthy. The darker you were, the further away you were to the colonizer and worthless you were as a human being. This is still the case, even when science debunks race. Modern science has proven that there is no genetic basis for black or white. These are social fictions. However, their impact remain real. They were created to justify conquest. And today, they continue to shape who has power, and who does not. Now, this is the danger of using their language. When we call ourselves black, and them white, we are still speaking in the language of our colonizers. We empower them, and subordinate ourselves to them. We are not shadows. We must note that we are the children of Africa, with names, cultures, and nations that existed before Europeans ever crossed our shores. Europeans are not white. They are Germans, French, British, Dutch, nations that have waged wars even amongst themselves. To every African youth watching this, let us remember, these categories are not facts of biology. The labels were created to divide and control you, to erase our true identities as Yoruba, Zulu, Wolof, Kikuyu, Igbo, Mosi, Shona, etc. They were meant to subordinate us to them. They are tools of empire. And to place Europeans above us, not as fellow humans, but as whites, entitled to rule. Know that you have the power to choose your own names, your own truths, or labels, if at all needed. Stop calling yourselves black and them white. Call yourselves African. Call them European or Caucasian. Because that's what you are, an African, and that's where freedom begins. If you call yourselves black, who then is the African? You see clearly and know in truth that they are not white. Why call them white? In fact, in some African languages, dating as far back before the European ever crossed our borders, they are called red because they are more to it than white. The future of Africa is not in Berlin or Paris. It is not in the United States of America. It is in our hands, in our unity, in our refusal to be named by those who would rule us. This is our call to the African youth. Let no one name you, let no empire divide you. We are not colors. We are not shadows. We are humans. We are the descendants of Africa, and we choose to name ourselves. If we are to build a future of dignity and sovereignty, we must stop using the language of our oppressors. We must call ourselves what we are, Africans. Not blacks, and never again call Europeans white, as if they are naturally destined to dominate. When we see ourselves as Africans first, we see our common struggle. We see our shared future. We are the children of the sun. We are not shadows. This is why we speak. To expose the roots of racial myths. To dismantle the language of division. And to remind every African, our freedom begins when we refuse to be named by our enemies. Perspective matters. Liberation lens.
You have just seen the world through a different lens. Subscribe, comment, share, and help amplify voices that deserve to be heard. Until next time, keep looking deeper. Liberation lens. Perspective matters.